And you heard about this man before you met him. You saw him on paper, and you were supposed to be his mentor.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the first time Barack Obama walked into your life.
Well, he told you a little bit about the story. He was late, but even before then, there was this buzz about this guy because he was a first-year law student, which big firms like that usually didn't take first years as summer associates. So he was like a hot shot, but I was skeptical because all these white folks, sorry guys, were all impressed with him, and I thought he's probably a black guy that can talk straight, and you know, I'll be the judge of that. Because here, you know, I get the folder, and first of all, it's Barack Hussein Obama. I'm like, who's got that name? You know, I'm from Chicago. We have, you know, Johns, and we have regular names. So I was sort of like, well, where is he from? And then I looked, and he grew up in Hawaii, and it's like, what black people grow up in Hawaii? So I had sort of a nerdy image in my head about him, sort of pocket protector kind of, hello, I'm Barack Obama. And then all the white partners were like, he's great. So I was like, he probably has absolutely no flavor. So I had this image of him in my head already. So I was like, yeah, whatever, it'll be a fine summer, it'll go quickly. And then I had to call him on the phone. This is when at first I had a little hint that there might be a little something more there. So I'm calling this Barack Obama kid. I'm like, hello, it's Michelle. And he's like, hello? And he's got that Barack Obama voice that did not match the nerdy image I had in my head. And I was sort of like, whoa, I really was like, whoa, the heat was coming out of the phone and my voice. Yeah.
I see the twinkle in your eyes.
No, really. I was intrigued. And then he showed up, and ladies, he's cute. He was cute back then, he was cute. So I was sort of like, ooh. But I didn't let him know that it was ooh. I was just sort of like, come in, sit down. And in my mind, I was like, I'm not dating people, this is my advisor, but I'm gonna introduce him to my friends. He's cute, he's black, he's got a job, he's gonna be somebody someday. So I was like hooking him up with other people. But the thing I loved about Barack on that first day, we hit it off instantly. You know, because he was curious, he wasn't anything like the image I had in his head. He had lots of flavor, y'all. He had the swag even back then, and he had an interesting life and an interesting take on things, and he was open and honest and self-deprecating and funny. He didn't take himself too seriously, but he took the world seriously in a way that I hadn't seen. You know, by then I was surrounded by go-getters, you know, folks who were going to a law firm, they were going to be partner, they were buying their condos, they were going to make a lot of money. That was my crowd, right? Barack was talking about, you know, organizing on the South Side and helping people find jobs. His whole conversation, his whole outlook on the world was just bigger and bolder. And we became friends instantly.
And then
he tried to date me. And he kept asking and asking. I was like, no, it's gonna be tacky. We're too black, you know, we're only two black people there. I was like, and I would tell him that we can't date, that's so cliche. And Barack was like, I don't care what these people think. He literally was like, do you think I care what these people think? Which I liked, because he wasn't like trying to impress the partners. So he asked me out. And that's all she wrote.
He asked you out, he bought you ice cream. There's a plaque right outside of the place where they had their first
Now that's one of those, that's a trip. Even my kids are like, are you kidding me? So outside of the ice cream store in our neighborhood, because we still live in the same neighborhood where we get Baskin and Robbins, like with our children, there is a plaque commemorating the fact that we had our first kiss there. And it is so embarrassing. I'm just like, oh my God, cover that up. But it's there, and they keep it clean, and they clean the snow off of it. You know, there's never leaves around it. So yeah, we made history at Baskin and Robbins.
That kiss, little did you know at the time of that kiss, there'd be a plaque.
There's a plaque.
So then he goes back to law school, and you do some thinking. You realize he's extraordinary, and you are in love with this man, and how do you hold on to yourself? And since we want people to read your book, I thought it would be wonderful if you could read a passage from your book about your thoughts about Barack Obama back then.
You guys want to hear it?
Want to hear it? All right.
Okay, here we go. He steered himself with a certainty I found astounding. All this inborn confidence was admirable, of course, but honestly, try living with it. For me, existing with Barack's strong sense of purpose, sleeping in the same bed with it, sitting at the breakfast table with it, was something to which I had to adjust. Not because he flaunted it exactly, but because it was so alive. In the presence of his certainty, his notion that he could make some sort of difference in the world, I couldn't help but feel a little bit lost by comparison. In my blinding drive to excel, in my need to do things perfectly, I'd missed the signs and taken the wrong road. I was deeply, delightfully in love with a guy whose forceful intellect and ambition could possibly end up swallowing mine. I saw it coming already, like a barreling wave with a mighty undertow. I wasn't going to get out of its path. I was too committed to Barack by then, too in love. But I did need to quickly anchor myself on 2 feet.
What about that? So then there were some tough times. You lost your best friend, you lost your dad, and you did some soul searching, which I'm certainly glad you did because it led me to you. So talk a little bit about that period of your life.
Well, up until that point, I had been what I describe in the book as a box checker, which I'm sure in DC, a lot of people
Hands are going up.
can relate to that. So up until that point in my life, I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do. You know, I was an A student. I got the star. I spelled the words right. I finished my homework. I showed up. I did the work. And I was operating on a effort, result kind of pattern. And that just landed me from Princeton to Harvard to a firm without really thinking about what I cared about. And Barack was just the opposite. That's what I described. He was that whirlwind of other that I hadn't experienced. And then I had the losses. I lost my best friend who contracted cancer. She was diagnosed in December and she died in May. Somebody was young and vibrant, and that was the first young loss. And me and another girlfriend, we were with her when she took her last breath. It was the first time I'd been with somebody when they died, when they left this earth. And that left me thinking, what am I doing? You know, if I were to die tomorrow, if I didn't take any moment to swerve or try something different, is this what I want my legacy to be? Is this how I want to live my life? Sitting on the 47th floor, looking through documents. You know, I could see the neighborhood where I was from my office, because my offices faced the south side. But I had no connection. I was so far up, so far away on that 47th floor that the community that had raised me, I had no contact with. And again, if I was gonna be marrying this guy, Barack Obama, by then, because we were going to be married, I knew that if I didn't get myself together, I would just be following his tornado. And I wasn't that kind of person, so I had to figure it out. I had to start like all over again and figure out what my passion was. And that's when I started journaling and started really exploring. And then I had to even confront the issue of whether I had the luxury to even think about passion. Because here I was, the daughter of 2 working class people, I write about this, who had never once had the luxury to think about passion, right? Passion is a luxury. how dare I sort of look at my high-paid salary and my sob and question whether I'm fulfilled. My father never once had the luxury of thinking about fulfillment. So I was struggling with all that. But eventually, Barack, my husband, pushed me and said, we can do this together. He said, you need to explore. So I really credit Barack with not only being a role model to me, but somebody who said, I'll have your back as you do this thing. And I don't think I would have been able to even begin exploring that if it weren't for him. And that exploration led me to you, Valerie Jarrett, who was a badass herself in city government. You know, she was, you were deputy chief of staff for the mayor, and was like one of the major women in the city, just bar none. You know, she's modest, but she was basically running the city along with a handful of senior aides. And I was so mesmerized by you, you know, because you were struggling with the same thing. You left your firm and came into work for Harold Washington because you wanted to do more than just practice law.
Took me a little longer. It took me 6 years. You figured it out in 2.
Yeah, but you had made more money. You could have afforded a little bit more than I could have. I still had college debt. So I met you, Valerie, and was hesitant about working for Daily because you were starting to work for Daily. But I didn't view myself as working for Mayor Daley. I viewed myself as working for this amazing Black woman that I wanted to learn more from. And so I left Sidley and Austin and came to the city and really never looked back after that.
And am I glad you did? My goodness. So we work together, you marry, and the next thing you know, your husband is thinking about politics. Now I have to tell you, the first night we had dinner while I was trying to recruit you to come and join government, I thought, well, he's extraordinary. And maybe if he's lucky, one day he might be mayor of Chicago. That was like the peak I could even imagine. When did he first start signaling to you that he was serious about running for office?
You know, politics wasn't always, it wasn't the thing on the table. For him, it was always change. It was, how do I impact the world more? And politics, the seat that, when the state Senate seat opened up, it was really after he had run a huge successful voter registration drive right around the time Carol Moseley Braun was running for office, and he caught people's attention. So people approached him about running for state senate, and I think that's when it was sort of like, maybe I should think about this. And of course, as you all know, what was my reaction? No, don't, please don't. Thank you.
He didn't listen.
And you didn't help.
I knew that was coming. I know. I was a pusher back then.
You're like, maybe.
Yeah. It's got promise. I didn't think it through. I didn't think it through because what I didn't appreciate is that in the state legislature that required him to spend time in Springfield. And it's hard to do that.
Which is, by the way, for those of you who don't know Illinois, it's far from Chicago. It's downstate.
And you spend the middle of the week there, several days during the week. And in your book, you are extraordinarily open about the fact that when you all wanted to have children, it wasn't that easy.
Right.
You had a miscarriage. You had to use IVF. And not everybody knows what that might be like. So perhaps you could share a little bit about what that was like while your husband's in Springfield.
Right. Well, one of the reasons I talk about infertility is that it's more prevalent than anybody ever told me. Doctors don't talk about it. Miscarriages are more prevalent than anybody ever said. I know that there are thousands of people in the audience today who are going through their own struggles and they feel alone in it like I did. You know, I talk about what it feels like to have a miscarriage, as somebody, you know, if you are a person who wants kids and has always spent your life dreaming about kids, and as I joke, you spend a good chunk of your young adult life trying not to get pregnant.
You know what that's about?
Playing and wishing, oh my God, Jesus, just just this month. So you spend your time just sort of going, phew. Because you think when it's time, it's going to be easy, but it isn't. And our infertility was unexplained. There was no real clear reason for it. It's just, it took us longer. So we went through IVF, which is a procedure that artificially has you stimulate your eggs. So it requires that you take shots every day, and you have to get an ultrasound, and it's a very invasive process for the woman.
And you're giving yourself these shots when he's out of town, right?
Exactly. So that was stressful. And I share it because I think we as women, so much of how our bodies function and our challenges, we don't talk about that. You know, I meet young women whose mothers never talk to them about menstruation, women who don't talk openly about menopause. I mean, and these are natural cycles in a woman's life. I mean, there's so much about our bodies that we're taught to be ashamed of. And so we don't educate ourselves or each other about these issues. And I don't want anybody out there, I've told your daughter, I tell all our young people, this whole situation isn't something that is a secret. I talk to everybody about it. I just happen to put it in the book because it's part of my story. But I want young women to understand that there is such a thing as a biological clock, and there is, that is something to factor in if you do want children. But a lot of young women don't know. And I think we have to be more open and honest in talking about, especially for young people, what's ahead and how do you plan for it and what do you expect? And when things happen that are natural, that it doesn't make you feel like a failure, which is what miscarriage often feels like to a woman. It feels like I can't do the most fundamental thing that I'm supposed to do as a woman, and somehow that's a blotch on me. And it's hurtful, and men should understand that. So that's why I share it.
Men, you paying attention? So then, you think that's hard. Then you actually have
Then they show
two
up.
children. Oh my goodness.
Those two.
Those two.
We were successful.
You have these beautiful children. You leave the city. You run Public Allies. You then go to the University of Chicago. Public Allies in the house,
Allies in the house. So
do
that was a
that.
nonprofit leadership training program that I had the pleasure of running. It was one of the best jobs of my life.
And you ran that beautifully, and then you look for another challenge. You go to the University of Chicago. Absolutely. So you are juggling a demanding career. You have two children. Your husband is in politics.
He's somewhere.
He's somewhere, not there.
He's
not
in some
there.
office.
Somewhere else. He decides to run for Congress. That didn't work out so well. And you are trying to figure out how you can take care of these two little children, as well as be a spouse to him and have a job. And you also share in the book that you two sought counseling. And tell us a little bit about what you thought you were going to get out of the counseling when you went in.
Well, let me say this about marriage, first of all. Marriage is the melding of two individuals' lives, and that's all cute, right? And Barack and I were in that mode where we were off doing our own things, and he'd have his job, and he'd be in Springfield, and he'd come back together, and we'd have our little dinner, and it was actually good to have that time away because we missed each other, and it was so great. And it was also good sometimes when he wasn't around, ladies. It was like good. I get the television to myself. I control the remote. You know, it was all good until you have children, which is your first really joint project together. And it's a hard one, and it's an important one. And in a lot of marriages, and I think this is changing more and more, there's still an imbalance in terms of who's responsible for what. The burden still falls mainly on women. And even though we were both working people, because he was traveling most of the time, I spent a lot of time. I had to do the doctor's appointments and the summer program and what we were doing this summer. And if a babysitter was sick, I was the one juggling. And when we lost a babysitter, I had to find one, and I was exhausted. And that's when the tension starts building up. So we go to marriage counseling. And in my mind, I thought, well, I'm gonna bring him to marriage counseling, and the counselor is gonna basically tell him to get himself together. Because I'm like, I know I'm right. So I'm gonna bring you along to Dr. So-and-so, and he's gonna tell you all the things I want you to hear. So I was like, okay, doctor, please tell him. And marriage counseling didn't work like that. The doctor kind of looked at me like, well, and then there's you. And I was like, you must not have heard the story right. I am perfect, and we are here for him. So the lesson I learned, for me, this counseling for me was a turning point for me personally, because I did what a lot of people thought. I was looking to my husband to make me happy. That was his responsibility to make me happy. And I realized I'm responsible for my happiness. I'm responsible for how I prioritize my life. And I can't be mad at him because he prioritizes his life differently and better.
So he was getting his workout in.
He got his workout in. You know, he's going to the gym. And instead of me being mad about it, I found a way to get the support I needed so that I could move myself up on my priority list. And I think we as women often do that. We don't feel like we are allowed to be our number one priority. And I think men have an easier time with that. But I learned how to put my workouts in, and how to get my rest, and how to ask for help. And what I worried when I was worried that would be bad for the girls, what I was learning was that it was important for them, my young daughters, to see a mother who valued herself. That I was modeling to them the kind of women that I wanted them to be, not martyrs, not people who didn't have a fulsome life. And that's always been it's a pull for women, especially working women. It's like we never feel like we're doing enough. We never feel like we're giving our kids enough or our jobs enough. And we're always tamping down our expectations and judging ourselves and judging each other harshly for the choices that we make. And there is no one right way to do this thing of mothering. There is no one right way. And I learned that, and I started giving myself a little more of a break. And Valerie and other women in my life, professional women, were role models for me, because Valerie was really among the first working single mothers that I saw with big baller jobs, who were teaching me how to manage it. And Valerie, you were always unapologetic when it came time to doing something for Laura. And Valerie I tease her about this all the time. I remember sitting in her office at